Welcome to Uncle's Channel. Thanks for watching today. And let's talk about the Mother series because there's a new documentary that just came out called EarthBound USA that is a 2-hour documentary, or nearly 2-hour documentary, that chronicles the localization of Mother 1, Mother 2, and Mother 3. Or I should say lack of localization because Nintendo has yet to complete that actual trilogy over here in America. But this documentary here, it is a fantastic documentary. It does interviews with people of Nintendo of America, interviews with like people who were the marketing department of America, the creator Itoy, they do an interview with him, people who created the Starman website, people who did the fan translation. I mean, like everything associated with the Mother games here in America. They pretty much were able to get interviews with the high up people, as well as doing like all kinds of cool reenactments as well, and just sort of fan stories. And like, it's a really well put together documentary. And since I just finished watching the film, it'd probably be fun to do a quick little breakdown and review to see if it's also worth your time to go through Jazzy Benson's EarthBound USA. Now, obviously, as I discuss it here, I'm not going to put the entire film behind me. I'll put little bits and pieces of the trailer, but for the most part, it's just going to be some of my collected clips of the Mother games as I'm talking about the movie here. Now, the film starts off interviewing a fellow known as Reed Young, who's going to be known as Reed Man when it comes to his involvement on a website called starman.net, but just sort of goes through like what his personal experience was playing Mother 2 or EarthBound when it very first came out back in the mid-1990s here in the United States. And I didn't really get to experience that myself because in the mid-1990s, I didn't actually have a Super Nintendo. I was still rocking the NES at the time. We didn't get a Super Nintendo until much later. And so I didn't get to like experience the full Mother series well until like past its heyday. And so it was sort of cool, like at least from a removed perspective, to see what this game meant to so many people back in the 1990s. And so like from that perspective, like that was pretty darn cool to see these interviews with him, as well as a fellow known as Tomato and some of the other people who are going to be heavily involved in starman.net. I really did enjoy seeing their first-hand experience and just sort of connect to fans in a distant way from my personal experience of the series. But also when I was going through like what it meant to fans, it's also going through like with interviews and sort of replayed footage here, or I guess recreated footage of the failure of the launch of Mother 2. As far as like Nintendo of America not necessarily handling the localization very well, as far as like the advertising campaign, it just simply not selling well, coming in that giant box with the player's guide, not being able to fit on the shelves well, and just sort of the, I guess, lack of support that the game actually got, and ending up in clearance bins across the country, and just simply leading to the idea that EarthBound or Mother 2 was a failure, at least here in the United States. And let me clarify what I mean by failure. A failure as far as like marketing comes, or amongst like overall popular support. It was a massive hit within a small cult community, and that cult community is going to find their way on this starman.net website. It's created by Reed Young, or he's going to be known as Reed Man, and a fellow known as Tomato, and they're going to sort of start it up, and they're going to build it from the ground up and sort of bring in all these other people who felt sort of like they were the only ones who enjoyed Mother 2, and they're going to come together on this website and just realize like, hey, there's an entire community here in the United States that truly does love this game. And from that point, you know, they're discussing jokes, they're discussing, you know, different, you know, lore, artwork, stuff like that, and it's just, you know, seeing the whole community. But then they discover that there's actually a Mother 1, or there's a game before EarthBound. And they actually figured this out. They try to get like a Japanese version of it. They order it in, they try to play it in Japanese, and they're getting ready to translate it. And then they discover that there's actually a fully translated version of it, like a prototype copy that Nintendo never released after they decided to localize and translate it. And they're able to get their hands on that. So it has the entire journey of like how starman.net dumped the entire cartridge on a ROM and simply changed the title screen from being Mother 1 to being EarthBound 0. Because obviously, you know, we have the EarthBound on the SNES is the first one, so it has to be a 0 version of it, and how that's sort of the running title of it. And I just didn't realize like exactly, you know, the huge fan base that was behind the, I guess, finding of the Mother 1 for us here in the United States. And it's just sort of cool to see like a dedicated fan base discovering something like that. And you can only imagine their excitement when they finally get to play through the prequel to a game that they loved so incredibly much. Like that's just a moment in time that they will never be able to recapture, and I'm sure it will live on in their minds forever. And then of course it goes into how they tried to appeal to Nintendo to bring that localization, actually publish it, since all the work was already done. They actually wrote letters to Nintendo trying to tell them, hey, it's out there, would you mind putting it on the Game Boy Color? And Nintendo, in typical Nintendo fashion, sort of did a cease and desist on using the logos, or at least the artwork for the Mother games on their news head and their letterhead and all that. I mean, typical Nintendo fashion for that. But at least they're appealing to Nintendo. You get some interviews with people at Nintendo, you know, their sort of thoughts behind it as well. And it's just a really interesting story of how Mother 1 and Mother 2 are sort of coming over to the United States. And then the film does go into the entire debacle or the entire mess of Mother 64 trying to be developed, or Mother 3, what happened to the game, and sort of goes somewhat behind the scenes on some of that. But then it also goes into like the fan translation for the Game Boy Advance. And I just had no idea like the entire fan translation. I always assumed it was just somebody out there who knew Japanese and sort of made the translation. I didn't realize like it was the actual community so deeply ingrained in the actual fan translation of Mother 3, and also to the degree of like how amazing that translation is, and Nintendo themselves really doesn't feel like they could do any better if they even tried to make a translation of the game. And man, there's some really awesome stuff that's discovered in the Mother 3 portion of this video. And I'm not going to ruin it all because I'd like you to actually watch the film and support the company here. But man, like I really did enjoy it because Mother 3 is my favorite of the series. And to see like the entire behind the scenes of like the localization process and all that, fantastic. And then it goes into the interview here with Toy himself, the creator of the Mother games. And I loved like seeing him in action, seeing him talk about it. And made me actually want to look up more interviews with him because he just seems like a really energetic and thoughtful and just a really great person deep down. And so I'd really like to go into more interviews with him. But it was just really cool to see like this entire community, this entire fan base that wasn't just simply a community built around the game that they loved and talked about it and such, that they actually made a difference as far as like how the localization happened, how the translation happened, talking to Nintendo. It's just a really interesting documentary, and like 2 hours may seem like a long time to go through it all, but I really wouldn't have it any shorter because I feel like by using a full 2 hour time span here, they're actually able to tell like individual stories, talk about, you know, the individual journeys here. I mean, even getting like some of the emotional parts when Tomato's cat was getting sick and such as that. I mean, like as a cat guy myself, like that was a impactful part of the story as far as like talking about like his mental health journeys and the fan translation. I mean, there's just a lot of really emotional or in-depth stuff when it comes to this particular film. And I just really enjoyed watching it, and just simply as a Mother fan, I enjoyed it. But I also think as like a video game fan in general, someone who's just interested in the history of like what happens to games and localization and translation and all that, and the community in general, I think you would also enjoy this film. Now, like I said, the movie is $7 on fangamer.com if you want to simply rent it, $27 if you want to buy the movie. And I know sometimes like we think to ourselves, like in the age of YouTube, like does anyone really want to purchase a documentary? Because there's like so many like fantastic documentaries of, you know, game histories or lost game content or fan translations. All of that's well documented on YouTube. And it's like, well, why do I want to pay for it? Well, this particular documentary was 10 years in the making, so it was sort of before the age of documentaries being so high quality on YouTube, but also because of the interviews they're able to give, like Nintendo, or the interviews with Toy, interviews with some of the Starmen.net people, or just simply people who are behind the localization, or even like the filming of like the recreation of some of the scenes from like the 1990s or some of the props. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff like inside the documentary that you might not see in a normal one on just simply, you know, YouTube, made by somebody like me or something. Like I don't have the budget for any of these type of things. And so it's a very much of a professionally made, well done documentary. And is it something that you're probably going to watch like more than once? Maybe, maybe not. I'm a pretty big Mother fan. I'm probably going to watch it one time, and maybe many years from now, maybe watch it again. But for the most part, I think it's more of a rental than it is a purchase. But still, a $7 rental, to me, definitely worth it. And you're also supporting a project here that encourages more of this type of content in the future. And so I'm always a big fan of supporting, you know, smaller local artists like Jazzy Benson here when it comes to encouraging the more documentaries for the video game side. So in my opinion, an enjoyable documentary, a well-done documentary, informative documentary, and personally, I think it is worth your time to go through it if you're a Mother fan. And even if you're not a Mother fan, I think you can also enjoy the film. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check my other videos listed up above. As always, go out there, find a great game to play. Simply have a great rest of the day.